Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Welcome back to TestMu conference. Very excited for this amazing discussion lined up here. I'm Mohit, VP of Strategic Sales and Partnership, and I'm delighted to welcome you all to this exciting panel discussion for the day three of the conference. We're going to talk about trusting the machine and building confidence in AI native testing decisions. Of course, it's an understatement to say that AI is really transforming how we test software, making critical decisions, prioritizing what to test, test designs. But alongside, when innovation at stake and quality assurance at stake, we have a big question also coming up. Can we really trust the machine? So, in this panel, we're going to talk about how we explore and forge new partnerships between testers and AI. How do we build confidence in AI driven testing while keeping fairness, transparency, and accountability at the center? We have got a stellar group of visionaries who have shaped many platforms and tools that enterprises and QA professionals use in day to day life. So, let me quickly introduce the panel for us today. We have Asaf Sar, VP of Product Management at Tricentis, driving the vision for their automation portfolio and leading innovation in AI native and agentic test automation. With nearly 3 decades in QE and DevOps, he has built many high performing teams across startups and global enterprises. Next, we have Cody joining us third time in a row and a constant participant on this forum. He leads the platform innovation at Katalon and supporting teams worldwide. He brings engineering leadership experiences across industries from finance, healthcare, emerging tech, name it all. Next, we have Kuljit Nakol, the Chief Product and Marketing Officer at ACCELQ, again a constant participant on this panel, joining us for second year in the row. He's been shaping the product strategy and continuous transformation at ACCELQ. A Carnegie Mellon graduate, he has been a key leader in advancing ALM and quality platforms over the years. And we also have Idan Gazid from GitHub Next, the team behind GitHub Copilot and other AI first developer tools from GitHub, a designer, a developer, and a former Django core contributor. He's passionate about making software development faster, safer, and more accessible. So let's roll it up. I welcome all four of you and really looking forward to welcoming your thoughts. So let's get started. Trust, a very human concept, and when we bring AI into critical decision making, it takes a whole new dimension. So I would love to welcome your opening thoughts on what does trust in AI really mean to you, and how does your platform, your organization plan to enable AI native experiences for global enterprises. We'll go across, starting with Asaf, Kodi, Guljeet, Adan. Please go ahead.
Sure. Hi, and again, thank you very much, Mohit, for the invite to this panel. Really great being here. So to the question itself, trust. Yeah, trust in AI is like really trusting something new, right? It's like it's not different than when you got the first kind of like autopilot with your car. You really experiment and you tried it out, and you're afraid. You really monitor the situation carefully, and the same goes with our software and with our solution. It's about really about predictability, it's about transparency and about accountability. Eventually, the user, you are accountable. Even if you're offloading, shifting some tasks to the AI, you're accountable, you're responsible for that. On our solution, for example, when a user uses our agentic solution to generate an automated scenario, it has two options. One is a full autonomous way, and the second one is kind of like a co-create, or really kind of like a co-pilot, right? Where you provide a prompt, you provide potentially a manual test case, you provide the test data, you guide the AI whatever you want, and then you really monitor what it does. So you have every step, you have the ability to accept what it's about to do, or whether you reject it, right? So it's about level of confidence. It always provides you with visibility, and eventually you are in charge of accepting that or not accepting the suggestion or the action that it's happening. And it's about learning, right? It's you learn how the AI work. It's about gaining trust along the process, and be able to really understand how the system works, how the system evolves, learns, and improve itself, and allowing you to really gain trust in the system. But again, you are the responsible, you're accountable, even if you have someone next to you, which in this case, it's the AI, it's the agentic, it's the bot that does the work for you. You are still accountable, and it's not like replacing you and you can give it a go drink your coffee, and expect your automated test case to be fully running and executed, which you can blindly trust.
Yeah, I'll pick up. I think a lot of what Asaf said, resonates with the way we think about this at Katalon. And, as you mentioned at the beginning, Mohit, trust is a very human experience. I'm always a little bit loath to anthropomorphize too much, but I do think it's might be even helpful in this case to think about, like, how do we grow to trust people? And I think it's usually gradually and through experience. And so as Asaf said, we try to give the opportunity, the optionality about, like, how much are you ready to trust the system. And also, I think another thing that facilitates trust when you're working with someone is being able to see what processes they're going through, having transparency, knowing what you're each doing. So we have similar features in our platform where you can start out with something as simple as having our test ops platform help you create a test script from requirements. And the system, you can see it asking you to elaborate on things that maybe aren't clear. And if you feel comfortable with that, you can take the next step and automate the execution of that test script. And if you feel comfortable with that, you can start automating, of course, the execution of that test suite and getting feedback from our reporting analytics platform, and getting help with analysis when those things fail. And then if you want to get after you've built up enough trust, you could engage with our True Test platform, where we are observing the application under test and actually using real user behavior to create tests for you. So then now at that point, you're doing quite a lot, but we still keep you in the loop, able to identify which user flows you want to actually automate, what you think is important. I mean, we try to help you see what's important. Again, back to sort of the idea that you've got a collaborator or a co-pilot. We let you see what we think is important, but you can reprioritize it on your own. And it just struck me, we all use the co-pilot term, so I'm going to be eager for Idan to comment, coming from the birthplace of that notion. I don't know if he's next though, but it might at some point. I'm going to want to hear it.
That sounded like an invitation to me. I guess I'll jump in. So yeah. Wow, there's a couple of different angles here. The core problem with AI as it is today, this is a rapidly evolving thing, is the AI's tendency to just be confident, and
Yep.
its relative inability to say, you know what, I don't got it. If I work with another human and I set them like a task and they do it, or they don't do it, unless they're lying to me, they say, like, I'm sorry, I didn't succeed at the thing that you asked me to do, is something that I expect to hear from another human I work with, if that's the case. But AI doesn't know how to do that. It says, like, oh, that's a great idea, or that's a great point, but then it can totally BS me about it. So when I think about testing, I mean, when I say testing, I really mean just software engineering in general. I think about sort of three things. The first is that supplying high quality context makes a big difference to outcomes. So if you're able to very crisply articulate your acceptance criteria, like, I want a task to be done, and you can say, here's here's my criteria for accepting it. And if that sounds like a test to you, then you're not wrong, right? Like that's a test is an excellent um, shape of context to supply, like that's very high quality signal to feed into that. And we see over and over again that like garbage in, garbage out. If you put in garbage sort of specs, you're going to get back, I don't know, something that is maybe very off base. And at the end of the day, as somebody who is a purveyor of AI things, the metric that I want to move is like, how frequently do the humans say, yes, that's what I want? So being really crisp about acceptance criteria, having evals at scale is something that is novel. Like previously, it's like I have a test suite and I run it on my computer and it passes or it fails or whatever, and that doesn't matter anymore because of the inherent non-determinism of AI. The only way to know is to run it at scale um, in order to know, like, is it generally moving in the right direction? Because any one run doesn't mean anything. And third is having the right user experience actually matters a lot, because how do I surface that confidence or that level of information to a user? Or even in other things, like with original Copilot, it was modeless, right? It showed suggestions in the form of ghost text, um, and it had this important quality of being modeless and ignorable, which is a weird thing to say about your product. Like, I want my product to be ignorable, um, but it turns out that that mattered a lot, because at the time when the suggestions were not good, it was cheap to evaluate because it's happening directly under my cursor in the file that I'm currently editing at a moment where I have maximum context in my head to be able to evaluate it as a human. And if I don't like the suggestion, then it's not like a modal thing where I'm like, I'm in Copilot mode or I'm not in Copilot mode. I just do what I was going to do anyway, which is keep typing. I ignore it, right? And then actually, through the act of typing, I'm offering more signal to the model to be able to cough up a useful suggestion. So these three things: how do you source quality context? How do you do evals at scale? And not ignoring how we surface those signals to the user, or what's the user experience like? Is it more spec driven development? Am I having people, like, now the trend is very clearly in the direction of like people author markdown specs that then get compiled by the LLM into software. That's also a user experience. It's a very different user experience. The user experience of ghost text was right for very small suggestions, but like when you want to suggest larger pieces of software, how do you make that tolerable? So I think that's the sort of the tripod that I think about when it comes to sort of like trustworthiness, or those are the ingredients.
Yeah, well, wow. I think between three of them, with everyone covered kind of all the dimensions, and I always love kind of a deja vu moment having it done here, because all three of us most can go very testing heavy, and he brings the software engineering dimension to
Yeah.
to the thought process, right? But the way kind of just commenting on what three of them shared, right? We look at it as kind of a macro level and then at a micro level, right? So at a macro level, you have your usual suspects in trust, right? You have the hallucination, and then you have security. The first two things that comes to mind, you talk to any enterprises, regardless of whether it's testing or what, that's kind of right now the biggest two usual suspects. And in our mind, those two are actually relatively easy to deal with, because they are more technical in nature in terms of how you approach that challenge, right? A lot of education related to data security in terms of how you're approaching your LLM models. You can ensure enterprises, their concerns on data security is kind of put to rest, right? Same with hallucinations. If you do the right thing in terms of adopting and implementing your LLM models, whether it be leveraging RAG or other frameworks and masking those data, right? So those that macro level trust challenges, I think, are still relatively easier to adopt. And as the technology evolves, I think we're going to get stronger there. It's really the micro level challenges in trust which kind of go a few layers deeper. And one of the things Idan just started talking about was being context sensitive, right? uh, Even before that, at a micro level, I would say we live in a world where it's really getting harder to tell between fake and real, and within AI also. That's the first level of trust that we need to develop with our consumer, right? What is real AI? What is fake AI? And what I mean by fake AI is not fake AI. What I mean by fake AI is it's really easy to generate things right now, right? Whatever implementation you go with, you can just generate a lot of things you need, right? And it can really kind of put that trust in question if that was how your initial relationship with your consumer is going to be, right? And that's where context sensitive AI becomes really important. And I would take Idan's point to one more level in terms of context sensitive, not just being trained on what you're feeding in, but also being able to have trained on what already exists, building on what it has already generated for you, so that the training of the model and the training of what it can really help you with is not just based on what it knows in terms of static data, but also what it's own generating in the past 3 months, 6 months, and being able to build on that. And that's where the real long-term trust, right, is going to develop. And that's kind of been the philosophy in terms of how we are also trying to evolve in this space. And definitely exciting times in terms of both technology and how to develop that trust for kind of a longer term adoption, right?
Couldn't agree more on the exciting times. And I heard all of you, if I distill it down, I heard almost that, hey, trust is a two-way street, and context, process, and having a degree of balance is really what gives more determinism. And great segue, Guljeet, from you on what I wanted to bring up next: macro and micro. There are different approaches to how we tackle challenges. And so let's talk about that a bit more in real world adoption and challenges. Of course, these are real. So when teams and enterprises globally who you are working with, when they bring AI into testing, is always a hurdle or always a starting point for them. Sometimes it could be a technical issue, it could be cultural, or maybe even leadership alignment. So, from your experiences, I would love to know what's the very first or the initial barriers that organizations should prepare for as they scale and bring AI into mainstream. Let's hear from Kwadi, Gulji, Dasaf, Idan. Most welcome to contribute. Over to you.
All right. Yeah. So it's tough to say. I mean, you've got three components there, but my experience is I haven't been to an organization yet, mine or our customers, where leadership isn't eager to introduce AI. We can argue that maybe sometimes over eager. So I think that that's usually taken care of. I think that we have access to AI technology, and it's only becoming more accessible. So for me, it's really culture that needs to be addressed first, and that of course comes from leadership. But I think that one of the first things that, and in my experience at Katalon, one of the first things that I think needs to happen is to create, confidence and safety in the teams. Let them know, you know, why you're doing this, right? That you're not here to, displace them. And I think that, I think we all know, and I think people out in the audience, there's a great deal of like underlying unease and fear in the technology community broadly, certainly in the testing community, that this is all going to replace all of us. And I think that what's the whole point? We're humans living human lives, and like ultimately nothing has any purpose if it's not supporting that. So we need to think about like this is a tool, and how do we support the processes and the lives we live. So start with that, create that, and then give some space for, I think, a team to understand the capabilities, and I think as a leader, really listen to your teams and what they need. because it's not always what you may think. For example, a given testing team may need to be able to generate more tests, or they may need to be able to understand the failures in a stable test suite better. Like, you should really listen to the needs, and then work with the team to see, like, well, here's how I think we could get you the tools to make you more effective. So I think that's it, and create some curiosity, and this isn't directly related, but one thing I did want to get in, because when Idan was talking about the fact that AI is prone to sort of string you along, or tell you how great things are. I think that is something that is a little antithetical to the sort of tester mentality, right? Your testing team is rarely the most optimistic team in your org, and so I think as you're introducing this particular technology to them, it's important to realize that they have like a slightly different perspective sometimes than maybe your core engineering teams, and you should listen to that and think about like how it intersects differently uh, than maybe traditional engineering.
Yeah, couldn't agree more. I mean, the moment you asked that question, Mohit, trust was kind of the first thing that was going on in my mind as well, and the rhetoric around that really has to be consciously changed, because we see so many organizations kind of keep bringing security and those aspects, and that's not going to help build that ground up trust, and especially in this technology, right? And if we look at kind of transformations, and all of us have been around for a bit to see whether it be cloud transformation, desktop to web transformation to what have you. We've always talked about people, process, technology impacts, and then figured out organizational change management, culture, or one of these three or a couple of these dimensions are the ones which are the barriers, and which ones is your top priority. But we all would agree that this is more transformative than pretty much anything that we've kind of experienced in our lifetimes, right? And that trust becomes kind of the basis platform of this. And one of the practical ways, recently I came across one of the organizations, they started an initiative, and they basically said every week every manager has to chat with their team and ask them practically how did they use AI into their daily lives. Forget any SaaS product, forget products that you already are injecting AI. How did you add one more aspect of your productivity by using AI? So I felt that that was a great channel to kind of embed that trust, so that that culture can be driven up ground up. And it could be something as simple as how you use kind of a GPT model in terms of making your day-to-day tasks more automatable or more efficient, or creativity. It could be any aspect of it, right? But that's kind of one channel which I felt was quite interesting, and some of the others that Cody already covered, right? But then I also feel, other than that, there is another aspect to the barrier. uh, Given the nature of how much efficiency this can bring to us, um, we really believe the productivity metrics needs to be redefined. And unless that productivity metrics is challenged, we are going to see slower adoption of what value this can truly bring to, right? And unless that challenge is put in place by completely redefining productivity metrics from across the life cycle of software testing. And I'm sure Idan would want to say that extending out to software engineering, but in our world, just that life cycle and pulling out each single metrics and redefining ground up will then create right goals and objectives for the team to be able to go out and achieve and set up a positive kind of path to overcome those barriers, right?
Yeah, I can definitely pick up on this. It's really about like the culture. It's about people experiencing this productivity boost, and it gives an energy and kind of like pushing everything forward. What I see is the culture thing, less on the technical aspect, and it depends on the organization, right? We are working with so many organization enterprises There are those that are always front runners, adopting new technologies and are running, and there are those that are more cautious, staying behind, and kind of like we're not really touching that. But this AI shift and the AI movement in the last couple of years, the pressure comes all the way. It comes bottom up from the users, right? But whether it's developer, testers, QA engineers, marketing, the tech writer, everyone is using that, and also top down, right? So the board of an organization come to the CEO and said, how can you improve productivity? What can you do in order to accelerate your differentiation, and how you can go to market faster, raise quality, etc. Right? So it's really about changing the culture, and it forces us to go in this direction and see that. But it's about also like kind of like quick, like small wins, right? Start something, see the value, and eventually go that. I also see that in my house. I'm an early adopter of every technology, and my wife not that much, but today she and ChatGPT are the best friends, right? So it's kind of like the day to day you are shifting task into this one, and we see it in our business definitely in that regard. So start small, low risk, high volume tasks, shifting that into, and eventually raise as the technology advance. Also, the culture change in the organization and more adoption, and we see it growing, and it's amazing. I think it's exciting times for us all.
Um,
Go ahead. Idan.
oh, sorry. No, please.
Go ahead. Very, very practical tips. Very glad. Essentially, resounding comment on culture, creating a safe space, and everybody understands the why. And I think that's where productivity, small wins. So I'm going to come to you next, Idan, on really having this the starting point to establishing a balance. So human in the loop and the guardrails around how to really give autonomy to AI native processes. So how do you balance between giving AI freedom and ensuring a human oversight? Uh, so would love your comments, Idan, and then let's go to Guljeet and Asaf on this.
Um, that's a good question. How do you give people oversight? Um, the problem is people don't like to work. At the end of the day, like,
So
you know,
true.
if I dump like a huge diff in your face and be like, review this, that's not going to feel good. I don't like reviewing other people's code when they're people, and I definitely don't like doing it for robots. Like, you know, if a robot just like vomited out like, you know, a huge like set of changes, I'm not going to be like first in line to like volunteer to review that. Because at the end of the day, like we say, at the end of the day, no matter how many co-pilots I have with me, I'm the pilot. I'm responsible for what I end up hitting merge on. So um, uh, I think there's a couple of things here. First of all, there's the tools themselves do need to get better. And by that, I mean, you know, in the previous round of sort of the questions that people asked, a lot of us said tools. Um, and so I'd like to maybe draw the analogy between AI and power tools. Like I can use like a regular hammer to like nail nails into like some wood, or I can get a nail gun. And if I want to build skyscrapers, I probably want to have nail guns for all the construction workers. The nail gun doesn't replace the construction workers. I still need the construction worker to pick up the nail gun and use it. I'm sure that the first nail guns didn't have that many safety features, and some people got injured as a result. Uh, so when I say improving the tools, what I mean is, you know, modern nail guns, unless they're pressed up against a hard surface, they won't let you pull the trigger, right? Or if I have like a rotary saw, there's now like these things that like the moment my finger touches the saw, like, you know, something stops the saw. Um, these are not things that existed when those power tools were invented. It took a lot of effort from people to invent those things. Now, what exactly is that for AI? I don't know. That's exactly what we're trying to figure out. But so the part of it is that, but part of it ends up manifesting in other ways. And I'll draw like a specific example. So like 2 years ago, we did Copilot Workspace, which was basically sort of a spec-driven approach to generating larger software changes, like not like one line, but I want to like fix a bug or implement a feature, which now like all of the agentic tools are doing this sort of thing. One of the sort of underrepresented things that we didn't really talk about that much in public, but I found to be really fascinating. Copilot Workspace had a very specific flow. It's like you start with a task, you would then use AI to produce a spec, like a before and after, like here's the current state of the system and here's the desired state of the system. And that's plain English, and the human could then alter the before state in order to like correct the AI's understanding of like how it works today. And the human could use natural language to alter the desired state to help the AI understand what it is that we're actually reaching for. And only once the human said, okay, I'm happy with the spec, it would then produce a plan. That's when it would actually say, okay, I am now finding the files that I need to touch, and I'm building a bullet point list, again, in natural language, of like what I'm going to do in each file. And then once the human, again, they can edit that and then say, okay. Um, uh, Only when the human approves the plan does the generation step actually happen. And that generation step takes a lot of time, right? Like the deeper you want the models to think, like as an axiom, inference time doesn't go down, right? It stays constant. If it gets faster, we'll just do more of it. But one of the interesting side effects of this that I found is that having the plan step, like something that I, as the human, ingest through my eyeballs, um, made the resulting diff more tolerable to me. It's pure user experience. Like the diff is still the same size, but because I had a plan, I read the plan, I now have an expectation in my head of like, in this file, I'm expecting to see like this, and this. And in that file, I'm expecting to see that and that. Just having that step made the review phase feel better, even though it's exactly the same work as if I didn't have the plan, like shown to me earlier. So some of these things are like under the waterline. When I say like user experience actually matters, this is kind of what I'm getting at, is that sometimes having these phases that make you do a little bit more work earlier as a human, or a little bit more effort earlier, pays off in the form of it feels better to review it later. It's like lower cognitive load to assess what comes out of these tools down the road. So yeah, but ultimately, like, when people ask, like, how do I get the most value out of this in my business, which I get asked, like, a decent amount, I unfortunately have to say that there's an Overton window that is going to move, just like for cloud. Like a decade ago, banks were like, I'm not going to run my stuff in the cloud. What do you mean my application is going to run on the same machine as some random other person? We're a bank. That's not the way it works. And now all the banks run in the cloud. So like people got used to that. The same thing is going to happen with AI, that more people, the skill floor will go up. And there's no substitute for acquiring a feel through using it. When people say like, how do I get the most value out of AI tools in my business today? I'm like, well, are you using it? Is every engineer using it? And I don't love the whole thing of like, every week, let's have a meeting where you tell me what you did with AI this week. That just feels a little synthetic, but it is the correct thing in terms of like, everybody, you can't learn how to drive a car by reading a book. You've got to go and get a feel for it by driving. And only then can you go and get your driver's license. Like, so I think that's sort of what's playing around in the back of my head. I don't know. I hope I answered the question correctly.
Absolutely. Let's,
Yeah.
Diljit and Asaf, your thoughts, please.
Yeah, just when Idan said humans don't like to work, you know, they like to be in control, right?
Mhm.
So just building on that philosophy, and that's the best way to approach figuring out what that right balance is to your question. Where do you draw the line, and how do you balance human in loop, right? They don't like to work, 100% agree, but they like to be in control. And where they really whether it's human or any process area, where it gets really challenged in terms of its efficiency, throughput, and what we are trying to achieve in terms of speed at the end of the day, is the grind, the persistence, the depth needed in any process area to be able to achieve that speed and efficiency and throughput that we need, right? And if we just build on that, right, in terms of whether it's a perception of control in some areas or whether it's actual control, right, that's the way at least we are looking at breaking down, whether it be, again, I'm just going to be living in my world of test design, test development, execution, the feedback loop to DevOps, right? In each different process area, really going and looking into the layer of, all right, how do I give repetitive task, right? That's the obvious low-hanging fruit, right? Where it's an obvious repetitive task. How do I really give a smooth way of adoption in terms of being able to leverage technology, but at the same time, right, not just about the repetitive task, look a few more, peel the onion few more layers, right? Let's take a specific example of test development. Yes, if a human likes to be in control and they want to give direction on what they want to generate, the challenge is not in that. The challenge really comes when they want to do the troubleshooting cycles, right? That's where the efficiency of whatever script they're developing kind of goes for a toss. That's where the time gets really sucked in terms of, I'm just taking one process area as an example, right? The same thing applies whether it be during the design, execution, the DevOps phase, and so on, right? And picking up on those areas wherein you can give a more smoother adoption, so that my human sitting behind still feels they are in control, but it's the subtle efficiencies that the system is able to provide to really improve their throughput. And then slowly the autonomous nature of how the repetitive tasks are defined, that's going to keep changing. What we used to think are repetitive tasks are no longer repetitive tasks. Like Idan mentioned, if we take cloud as an example, or last 10 years of technology evolution, the nature and definition of those repetitive tasks will keep changing because of the evolution of technology. So that's kind of how at least we are also trying to approach it. But again, that human perspective is important to kind of solve the problem.
I can definitely relate to everything you said. Like the low risk repetitive tasks, those are items that are shifted. Then you can feel more confident within our solution, right? You have the self-filling capabilities, right, where the software just fixes a locator to identify an object, right? This is something that we had machine learning kind of like capability for several years, and everyone just trusts it, and it's kind of like given for granted. If you have a visual analysis, kind of like comparison between two screens, and eventually you say, okay, this is clearly a discrepancy, but that's how the application fixes automatically and go forward. What I want to emphasize in addition is about guardrails, right? It's about really ensuring that we have guardrails within the system, and it's about confidence, allowing us to really believe in that. You have guardrails like AI audits in that regards, really actions that are there that you are able to track and monitor. You have audit trails where you can see and monitor which test case eventually from requirements were generated into a manual test case and eventually converted into an automated out of the system, that okay, this is a human kind of like created test cases, and those were the system. So you can eventually go and trust the system and debug and analyze on that. And the most important part, eventually, everything is user overrideable, right? So the user eventually decide, I am the QA engineer, the test automation developer, the business user convert requirements into business requirements, etc. I can override any decision that the system, the AI, does for me, and I can eventually take the decision. And as I mentioned earlier, right at the start, it's about accountability. Eventually, you are the operator of the AI. You are still accountable. You cannot blame the AI if the system failed because you failed to cover this requirement when you release the solution, right?
That's fantastic to hear. So, if you just take a step back, we were talking about productivity and a new lens to productivity, right? We heard it in the previous round, and uh, we heard about power tools and user experience, and essentially there was a resounding yes on where the control really lies, who is the operator, right? And that's really take us to some of the practical uh, suggestions we would hear from you on if I am a QA leader and I am now setting up to have AI at scale. What are some of the frameworks, benchmarks, and metrics that you recommend or you prescribe as this AI driven testing decisions starting to scale in organizations? Would love to hear your thoughts on this. We can start with Guljeet, Kodi, and Idan.
Yeah, there are two. Th- this one's an interesting one, right? Because we are already thinking and hearing from our customers on testing of AI. And now we really have to think in terms of defining those metrics in testing AI, right? It's kind of a chicken or egg, right? In terms of uh, testing of AI, there have been now frameworks which can define kind of whether it be bias score, toxicity score, a lot of different tone judgment, right? Testing of prompt engineering. So, and the reason I bring testing of AI into this mix is, right, we really have to think of those metrics to be able to define a good success criteria out of whether your testing system is actually able to give you, put you in the right path, right? And then comes the process area metrics, which are kind of your usual suspects, right? Which is speed of your test development, your going back to basics, right? In testing, one of the biggest challenges in automation has always been sustainability, reliability, flakiness of tests, right? And then obviously the outcomes of how good your quality assurance is, which is defined by your defect leaks or what have you, right? But we the way we look at it is we really need to go back to basics in terms of how strong your bridge is being built. Otherwise that bridge is going to fall, right? How much you're generating is indeed going to be sustainable, so that you don't end up with more technical debt than what you already were trying to solve. Because generative AI can really easily put you down the track where you now have too much technical debt, right? So metrics like these would have to kind of come out more than what we used to kind of like, right? And these are the things which you kind of go back to basics on, right? So both dimensions to it, which is testing of AI itself, and then bringing out kind of some of the really core basic attributes to be able to define kind of that success criteria.
Yeah, picking up from that, I think as Guljeet just said, there's a lot of just basics, even when you're introducing AI into your testing methodology, but you're still reporting on a lot of the same activities, right? Are things passing or not passing? And today we still have most of our assertions are definitive, but we are increasingly hearing from our customers the question of when I have, and Gold started to or touched on this, right? When I have features that are built on AI that I'm trying to test, how do I assess those? And so we've recently been working with a few customers who are sort of on the frontier here on getting some of the same type of evaluation metrics into traditional end-to-end testing that they already had, in their development cycle when they're assessing prompts, assessing models. And it's not to say that we replace any of that, but we are introducing that to the right in the testing phase, just to make sure that when this is built into the entire system, that it continues to serve its purpose and work the way we anticipated it would. And I know Idan will probably have much more fundamental and interesting comments on evaluation. So sorry, I shouldn't keep setting you up for things, but I do look forward to hearing from you. But one thing I will touch on that I've seen at customers that I think we've been working to support is tracking sort of the provenance of artifacts in the process. So what got generated by AI, who approved the generation. So if it's a test script or an automation script, we want to know whether that was something that was generated from the AI system and which version of the AI model, and then also who did ultimately sign off on it, because as that IBM quote goes, the machine can't be held accountable. And what we've seen too from customers is they want to be able to track that. So it's a kind of a new, I don't think we've figured this all out, but it's a new sort of reporting that we've seen people looking for out of their systems.
Go
Uh,
ahead. Go
oh,
ahead.
oh, sorry. Yeah. So, I mean, my job is to be a futurist and sort of think about like, well, in the future, when all this stuff is great, then what do our lives look like? So like this sort of like abundance mindset. And and so like what prevents me from doing more testing now? Well, because it's a chore. I have to write tests, but it's not even one kind of tests. I have a lot of different kinds of tests. I have unit tests, I have integration tests, I have end-to-end tests. And like, why does not everybody write tests nowadays? Only the purest practitioners of the trade, they really care about like, and of course there's even more like, special, like, well, am I doing fuzzing? Am I doing this? Am I doing that? Whatever. So uh, I'd say that I come at it more from an angle of like, presume a world where it's cheap to write tests, either because AI can efficiently infer constraints out of my code and produce tests that match, or because it's very good at taking my natural language and helping me bake that down into a specific assertion to be made over my subject. Um, uh, and so in that world, like, this sort of the sentence of like write tests, not too many, mostly integration, is like what happens when that becomes a lot cheaper. What do we need? Like, it's like to my mind that goes in the direction of like, how do we help the humans get over their like their dated assumption that it requires a lot of effort to try testing, when like, in a world where it's like, no, actually that's free now. It might not be correct, but it's cheap to try. And so how do we encourage people to do that? And that question is like, what should I be shoving people towards? Generally say like, okay, aim for the middle part, integration, because that's the right level of abstraction. Obviously writing good tests is an art, but like, writing unit tests might be a lot easier for the LLMs. Maybe we should aim for that first. Or writing end-to-end tests, that's coming like, with the rise of MCPs and the ability of me to like point like, an LLM and equipped with the ability to like drive a web browser, like maybe I should be like going after that first. I don't know. That's a good question. It's more a question for you all because
Hmm.
I'm not from the world of testing, but like, in a world where I can point the LLMs to doing any one of these jobs, which of these jobs should I be trying to encourage it to do on behalf of the humans so that we get to that abundance mindset?
That's fantastic. We started with accountability and traceability being the core of these frameworks that can help us. And great segue to how Idan, you kind of set the tone. Let's get a sneak peek in our final question. I would love to get a sneak peek from your future crystal ball, each one of you. How does I, as a tester, get ready to this promise of abundance from AI? How do I get ready for this so that I continue to deliver value? What's your thought on that? And we can start with Kodi, Asaf, Idan, and closing notes with Pulji.
Wow. Yeah. I was kind of dreading this one because the 3 to 5 year projection, I am not paid or even as a hobby much of a futurist, and particularly these days, I feel like the rate of change, and I think this is our audience, I'm sure is wrestling with this as well, right? The rate of change is so fast, right? I mean, we've seen, it's like every week I'm talking about, oh, well, a new model came out and it can do this, and we should be able to, to what Idan said earlier, like maybe we are in sort of an abundance right now, right? We've got probably some excess, or well, a lot of funding of GPUs, and we have a lot of model development. So we do have some real powerful tools. But in terms of what I think the question was something like, where do I think humans will still be sort of primary in the process? I do come back to the notion that a machine can't be accountable, so it's always a human. What are humans accountable for? They're accountable for setting the policies that are going to like govern the system, right? Today, we do that with a bunch of test assertions. In the future, we might do it with broader, higher level natural language scoped descriptions of systems. But we're going to need humans to decide those things. And then, I think in terms of like what will AI be able to do, what things will hand over to it, I do come back to the way it works when you're working with humans. Like you gradually see what they're capable of and enable them to, I said, you don't want to defer management decisions. Well, you don't want to give them all away. Like at the top level, someone's got to be accountable. But gradually, as you see that other people are able to take over stuff, you let them do it, and then you as whatever level manager, you retain the accountability for the final outcome. So I see that as the evolution of like we just keep trying to level up what we're all doing. And to that point, if you ask what should you be doing if you're in this business or any business, it's thinking more about how you understand the business that you're in and how you collaborate across systems. Idan a couple of times has said that he's thinking more broadly about the overall just development of systems, right? Not just testing, right? But to some extent, I think a lot about it being all one thing. That like there's this ongoing process of checking to see if the system's doing what it's supposed to be doing, and if it's not, sending some kind of signal back upstream to say this needs to change, and then going around and around. And so I imagine if we can get better, if the people out in the audience can get better at facilitating that process. So if you may end up wearing more hats in the future, right? You might not think of yourself as just a quality engineer. You might think of yourself as some kind of systems engineer who's actually doing more, but maybe you lean into the sort of right-hand side of like what's happening in production and how can we evaluate it. But are you good at, can you get better at giving feedback to the people who are on the more core engineering side of the house? Can you give them good feedback to say, here's what's happening and I can tell you this, this, and this. Can you translate that into something that will make the system work the way we want? That's kind of what I imagine when I imagine the future, whether it's, I don't know if I can get out 5 years, but
yeah. Cool. Thank you, Cody. So from my perspective, I think our industry is changing dramatically, and in 3 to 5 years, there will be a major paradigm shift. If I look at from the angle of test automation, like I've been developing test automation script 25, even more years ago, right? And if you look along the years, there were different frameworks, different solutions, but the paradigm was always the same, right? You need to identify an object on the screen based on different properties, find it, and eventually perform some action. This is totally and will completely shift towards AI, right? So taking a test case, generate it from requirement into an automated scenario, self-heal and able to do it. And even it will be more smart, right? Because the AI will be able to identify a change in a system, understand the risk, and run the proper regression cycle based on it, and not just, okay, I need to execute 10,000 test cases because I changed a line of code. All these things will eventually be there, and everything accompanying it, like synthetic test data that you need, right? Generating the proper data. Or you have systems that know how to monitor users based on production data, or some stuff like Gainsight or WalkMe that knows how the user actually go, and you have real user monitoring. It's another input into the AI. So all these contexts, all these signals that fit into the AI will allow you to really own the AI completely, the automation side. For the human part, the most important part is to stay subject matter experts, right? And be the domain expert in what you are doing. Be able to really define the quality strategy, the risk, understanding risk and defining that, and steer the organization in the right direction how to do it. Exploratory testing will stay with human. From my perspective, it's a everything. We try to automate everything, but we never automate everything. And even with AI, there will be an aspect of exploration or doing something which is different than what you normally do, and try to do in that regards and do it there. But we are shifting, and our persona, the key persona, which is a QA engineer, test automation experts, etc., is shifting into this area. Compliance-driven areas is another thing that will stay with human, right? Everything around compliancy, banking regulations, healthcare, and all these things are super important. And as I mentioned, domain expertise, but also, as we all know, right, prompt engineering, and really understanding how to feed and drive these AIs to get maximum value. That's how we'll eventually own. So the daily task of taking a requirement and automating, this one will be done. We will evolve into the next level of more unique items that we are still smarter.
Over to you, Idan.
Boo. Well, first of all, +1 to what Asaf was saying about extending my line of sight. I shouldn't have to wait to deploy to find out that I've wrecked my PERC 95 latencies. If AI can tell me at development time, hey, that endpoint that you're adding work to is already super hot, like you're gonna have a bad time. Like right now, my vision only my flashlight only illuminates like as far as like CI, but I want my flashlight to last into production to see how it like goes. So like that's definitely gonna happen. I think overall we're moving towards a world where software is increasingly defined in natural language. We're already seeing the start of this. And the spec-driven development thing, that's just, it opens up software to a much broader set of people. But even the people that are already authoring software today, I think, you still need software sensibilities and software knowledge, particularly for a lot of kinds of software. In that world, all code, including the tests, disappears into the background. And so tests are invisible, and yet they're essential because they're generated alongside the code. Or maybe they were generated in a previous round of code generation, and some part of AI decided this is a test that's worth keeping around. It's not just about this specific thing. So we're going to have this like proliferation of tests. So it's a little bit like tests are dead, long-lived tests. Like they disappear from my site, and yet they're essential to boosting the correctness of what is generated in a world where I'm generating the code. So it's a little bit this sort of self-fulfilling thing of like tests become essential because they are what supply the signal that makes the human either confident or skeptical. Like, very rare do you have absolutes, like this is definitely wrong or this is definitely right. But like the tests are going to be what ends up supplying that sort of like confidence score to the human being, like, I generated this thing, but like it doesn't look like all the tests are passing. And maybe it's the test that's wrong, but like, we're going to be leaning on that more and more as we shift further and further away from code to natural language. Like today, there are still a lot of people that know how to write assembler. Not that many, less than before. as we've moved further and further away from the metal, like, I can find a lot more Python programmers than I can find Java programmers, than I can find C programmers, than I can find assembler programmers. And so, like, what's one more move up that stack? We're just going to, like, be a little further away. And most people will still live at that higher altitude, and fewer people will know how to go all the way down. So I guess that's my take on the future, but I don't think tests are going away so much as I think they don't necessarily, like, they're not a thing that I think about authoring directly in the same way that I don't think about authoring the code directly anymore. It's something that happens as part of the code generation process. So they become invisible, but become more essential.
Going last is like maybe putting icing on the top. I think everything covered. Like Cody said, I don't have a crystal ball. I don't know what it's going to be, but I think all of us can agree that the way we interact with systems and the experience we have going through applications and screens and the whole the experience of interaction of the technology, that is going to change. We don't know exactly how. So what we are testing is going to change, and then how we approach testing is going to change, right? Many different examples, like Ida and Asaf, everyone already kind of shared what those changes would be, but these two are certain to happen. None of us exactly know what that would be, right? But the baby steps I can share from my perspective in terms of both of those aspects of what we are going to test is going to change and how we are going to test is going to change. It has started out with very disintegrated in terms of the way it's being approached because of the nature of how fast the technology is changing, right? So whether it be too much generation and trying to solve that problem, or generation in a silo without being kind of integrated into the ecosystem, right? So agentic technology is bringing a little bit more cohesiveness to and making sense of that generation, how to have different frameworks that complement your LLM to make sense of how you can bring efficiency in an integrated ecosystem. Simple examples like, if I'm on Slack and I'm trying to handle an issue, do I really need to interact with my test system to figure out to run a quick sanity or a regression suite? Can't I just get my system to initiate it, run it, and give me a decisive answer? So we are going to see, and I'm just sharing a little snippet of kind of the baby steps towards that 3 to 5 year change, but it certainly will have to be a more integrated ecosystem to bring real change, to be able to handle both the type of applications we test and how we test, right? But yeah, I know this was the last answer. Again, thanks for having us, Mohit. It was you guys are building a really tight community, and it's always fun to get into these discussions, especially with thought leaders in our space.
Yeah, I really appreciate it too.
You couldn't see, but the community is really cheering on what he said, that testing is going to be pivotal, it's going to be core, whether it's visible, invisible, in different forms. And great to hear what he said. You said, hey, the promise of abundance is real, but human. And the way we are going to realize that is more pivotal to really make that promise real. Great to hear that. And great inputs on the why, a common connected why, using a new lens of productivity and frameworks you suggested. Thank you so much for all four of you coming together, sharing your visionary thoughts. Couldn't have enjoyed more, and I wish we had more time with you. Thank you so much. Community is really extended all the gratitude to you. It was lovely hosting you, Kwadi, Guljeet, Idan, and Asaf. Thank you so much for making time for community today.
Thank you,
Thank you
Mohit.
for the invite.
Thank
Appreciate
you.
it.
Thank
Yeah,
you all. I
everyone.
really enjoyed it.
Have a good one.
Bye
To
all.
all the community members, stay tuned, keep posting your thoughts. We are all ears. Thanks. Have a great day.